Finger licking good. My Uncle Greg was the greatest fry cook of all time. I know that's a bold statement, considering there are fantastic chefs all over the world, but when it came to deep frying, my uncle was the best. In Kentucky, deep frying isn't just a cooking method, it's a way of life. We're the state that gave the world the Colonel's secret recipe, after all. We have a global reputation we have to protect. The most popular deep fried dish is easily chicken, but plenty of other meats taste great when coated in breading and burnt to a crisp in boiling hot oil. Fish, poultry, beef, pork, even sweets. Deep fried soda, ice cream, candy bars, even deep fried butter. Do you know what a hush puppy is? It's a clump of fried coating. But there's more to the art of deep fried cuisine than just the oil, marinating your ingredients, seasoning them, and what I would argue is the most important part, the dry rub. My uncle was a master of the dry rub. When he set up a booth at the state fair every year, people would line up for what seemed like miles to get their hands on his dishes. Pickle braised jumbo ribs, double battered butter burgers, chicken fried nacho sausages, mac and cheese chili poppers, and his unforgettable spicy, extra crispy chicken. He knew how to take the most absurd flavour combinations you could think of and always find a way to make them taste amazing. Cheese, ranch, onion, bacon, you name the flavour and he mastered it. The man was a hillbilly scientist. He'd spend hours on his outdoor kitchen patio, combining ingredients, testing different seasonings and spices, trying to find the boldest flavour combinations possible. One summer, I helped him prepare dinner for a family reunion, and I couldn't keep up. By the time I was getting my cutting board ready, he already had 6 different entrees prepared. He won awards from every food festival in town, topped every eating contest. He was a local celebrity, more famous and influential than the mayor, but it wasn't enough for him. He had an appetite that only ever grew stronger. He was 500 pounds by the time I entered high school, and he only ever seemed to get fatter. He didn't want to be known as the best fry cook in Kentucky. He wanted to take over the whole world. His extra crispy, extra spicy, extra fattening chicken was his magnum opus, the Citizen Kane of poultry dishes. It was so hot it could melt your head off, but so delicious you'd be just a pair of feet before you put it down. It was salty, savoury, sweet, just the right amount of stringent and sour. It satisfied any flavour profile. It was decadent, the kind of food biblical kings and ancient Egyptian emperors would eat, the kind of food the gods on Mount Olympus would dine on. It was fantastic, and it was always getting better. Uncle Greg was constantly tweaking his dry rub, his marinade, his breading, his aromatics, constantly adding new spices and taking old ones out. He emptied out entire shelves at superstores, butcher shops and Asian markets. Strangers would visit his house in the middle of the night to ask how his newest batch of chicken was coming along, and he'd stand outside late into the night telling them all about it. Then came the day he finally found it, the perfect mix of everything he had made up to this point, the ultimate dry rub, a masterpiece of marinade, and the world's best breading. He went through 16 entire chickens in less than a week. It tasted so good. The smell was so intoxicating. I could smell it from halfway across town. He had done it. He had finally found the perfect flavour. Everything tasted amazing with it. Chicken and turkey were the first meats he tried, and soon he experimented with beef, pork and lamb. He fried just about every fish in the sea and every vegetable in the ground. He fried fruit, he fried candy, he fried bread. He'd even fried chicken skin and eat it like potato chips. Unfortunately, we never got to try his new secret recipe. He stopped coming to family gatherings. Never bother with state fairs again. Never even left his house. He wanted it all to himself. Even his wife didn't know the recipe. She was growing more and more concerned by the day. She was a health nut. Never bothered eating what her husband made. They didn't even use the same kitchen. So at first, it all slipped under the radar. However, by the time he had built a shanty wall around his patio to keep the smoke from escaping, she knew something was very wrong. He had drained their savings dry by buying all sorts of fatty meats, and eventually she closed all their accounts and refused to buy him anything new. He started digging through the trash using rotten food from the back of the fridge. It didn't matter to him. The brine and skin would make it all taste amazing to him. The way the rotten ingredients squished and oozed as he chomped down, it was like they had some kind of creamy filling. By the time she left the house, his wife was the last thing on his mind. When I cooked with my Uncle Greg, one thing I always thought was funny was when I would dip the chicken into the batter and roll it around in the breading. My fingers would get coated in the stuff. It made my fingers look like giant uncooked chicken tenders. Apparently, Uncle Greg noticed this too. He'd always lick the batter off his pudgy fingers like a wild animal, but it was never as good as crunching down on the fried stuff. One day, he got a little too curious. He looked at his fingers covered in coating and was salivating uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, an impulse overcame him, and the rational part of his brain shut right off. He slammed his fingers down into the hot grease and held them there for a good 5 minutes. He made horrific, painful screams in pain, like a dying rabbit, but after the first 2 minutes, the nerve endings in his hand died and he felt nothing. When he pulled his hand out, his fingers were a shining golden brown, and the lower parts of his hand, all the way down to his wrist, had turned grey, with all the veins protruding out. Black as night, he pulled his hand to his face and took a big bite into his thumb, hard enough to snap the bone in half. He chomped down on what remained of it, the breading crunching and crisping loudly in his jaws. He chewed on the rest of his fingers, from the index all the way down to the pinky. He wasn't finished yet. He stuck the rest of his hand into his buttermilk marinade, rolled it around in the breading and repeated the process all over. This time, chomping down on his palm while coating it in nacho cheese, onion ranch and a side of chopped celery, you know, to be healthy. He deep fried his severed wrist and keep frying his arm past the elbow all the way down to his shoulder blade. Legend has it, he didn't bleed a single drop. I don't know how that would be possible. Maybe the oil cauterized the wounds. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but neither does eating your entire arm with a side of Doritos and some blue cheese dipping sauce. He repeated the whole process with his other arm, then his right leg, and then the left. When paramedics finally found him, his entire face was golden brown. Apparently, he stuck his whole face in the pot, fried it to a crisp, and then used the other to scrape it off so he could eat it. Then, when his face was nothing but gooey red mush, he jammed it back in there and fried it again, drowning in the boiling grease before he could further mutilate himself. I found his secret recipe when the rest of the family were rummaging through the house, dividing his belongings among themselves. I ripped it up and threw it in the garbage. I don't care how good it tastes. If it was delicious enough to make you eat yourself alive, it was too good. My uncle was the greatest fry cook who ever lived. Unfortunately, sometimes being the best isn't always a good thing. A full belly. 3 weeks ago, they had only mentioned it. One little attack on an old lady wasn't worth even 10 seconds on the national news. The only reason it even made it was the odd cannibalistic aspect of the attack. It wasn't just one attack though. By the week's end, it was 19. By the next day, it was 34. Each day was like this. The numbers grew exponentially. Then they stopped. No reports on any deaths, only specialists trying to brush away any worries the public had. They used large words and spoke confidently, and most people believed them. The numbers had to have been climbing, but no one seemed to worry. The everyday news, nearly every talk show ended with a few minutes of a PhD talking about this or that. Mass hysteria, they said. Satanic cults, they said. Even I fell into a catatonic trance from the false security. Everything was fine. If it weren't, wouldn't the government be doing something? It wasn't until I saw one at school that I found out how big a problem it had become. Its skin, tinted sickly green, like a seafoam green Crayola marker, was missing chunks or strips. I could see muscle, congealed, almost jelly-like. Blood ran a thick trail down its arm, and the dried variant splattered its tattered shirt. It was out in the yard, moving at a slow, shambling rate. Several of my classmates had recoiled, others making interested comments, and a select handful of brave students even raced to the window. Something primal in the back of my mind clicked on. Maybe it was fear. I couldn't tell you. All I knew was that it said run, and I wasn't about to disagree with it. I was halfway down the main hallway before Mrs. Falloon could even begin to yell at me to come back. She had enough on her plate with the kids, who were now opening the window and calling to the mass of gore and pus. The sun was bright and pleasant when I burst through the door and out into the parking lot. Finally, I was trying to think and realised how stupid I was for doing this. I ran simply because some strange, vague hunch told me. I waited there, panting lightly. I'd catch my breath and head back in. I was in for a detention anyway. Might as well soak up a little sun. That was before a scream rang out, several more following it. I waited, paralysed, for what seemed like an eternity. The fire alarm screeched its warning, and I could hear the dull roar of 474 pairs of feet clamouring to get out, just as they were taught. Before the sea of people flooded the halls, I saw one of my classmates. Bright red splashes covered their clothes. A few more shambled clumsily to join the first. The fear began again, this time renewed, pure and urging. I bolted. I didn't live too far from the school, but the further I went, the more of those things I found. They were slow, thankfully, and stupid. Avoiding them didn't prove too difficult. The sights they brought, that's another story. Blood everywhere, bits of flesh and clothes, people screaming silently with huge gaping holes in their throats. They look at me with pleading eyes as those things feast on them. Quietly, I whispered a prayer for them. God, help them. I rounded a corner, my feet hitting the sidewalk hard. My legs ached and my lungs held the start of pain. I stopped only a moment, but even that was too short. It had already caught my eye. One of those things. It was a monster, really. Had my mother in its arms. She watched me with wide eyes. They were scared, like a deer's. She tried to cry out to me. I lunged forward and clawed at the thing. I pulled and tore at it like a wild animal. I don't remember when it sunk its teeth into me, but I know it did. The pain was white hot and spread like fire up my arm and through my body. I collapsed. The creature bit me. More and more, teeth ripping away. At my side, my legs. The fire rippled with each bite. My eyes screwed shut and I was screaming, but I can't remember hearing anything but the blood thumping in my ears. The bites became more infrequent, and the hand with the first bite turned cold and numb. My mother, bloody and crying, dragged herself close to me and touched her hand to my face. I couldn't feel it. The cold had spread. Soft gurgling noises, like listening to a drowning person, faded from my ears. Everything went icy and dark. It's a wonder how much you retain once you become one of those monsters. You wouldn't believe it, and you relive it every second of every day. It's a long, long road from humanity. I should know. My belly's filled with it. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Don't forget to subscribe and click the like button, as this really does help the channel, and click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.